Utica. The first Utica was a former city in modern-day Tunisia. Many central New York locations have the names of ancient cities or people: Rome, Syracuse, Ithaca, Troy, Homer, Cicero, Ovid, and a number of others. The reuse of the name of ancient Utica for a modern village, then city, owes a great deal to classically trained surveyor Robert Harper, for many years a professor at King's College. It was he who gave out the central New York State classical names, and he stated that he named the village of Utica. However, another theory involves a 1798 meeting at Bagg's Tavern, where the name was picked from a hat holding 13 suggestions. How Utica came to be among them, if not due ultimately to Harper, is unknown. So much of it's unknown. So Utica, New York, sits right here along the Erie Canal route. I did do a video on the Erie Canal. If you haven't seen that, make sure you check that out. We take a short stop in Utica. In this video, we're going to shine the spotlight on this location. And as I always find helpful in these videos, we like to look at the population demographics down through time. We look at modern day Utica, 65,000 people, and we often shine the spotlight here at the 1900 mark. 56,000 people, so really our population modern day and 120 years ago almost the same. You see it peaking here in the 1900s up over 100,000 before it comes down again. But we have early settlement here in Utica, like you would expect from the New York State. And let's have a look at some of the architecture. And from a very early time period, we see structures like this in Utica. So multi-storied structures, arched windows with the peaks, and also have a little bit of interesting tech going on here. We have a Carnegie-style library with the basement windows, columns, the Greco-Roman classical stylings of the old world structures that we've become used to seeing in these investigations. This is a nice crisp photo giving us a look at really the magnitude of these types of structures. At this early time period, they'll tell us that this was newly constructed. This is no doubt a photo from the early 1900s, and they'll tell us that this is a newly constructed building, but to my eye, none of this looking new whatsoever. Here we go, 1902, we have a construction date written right in the front of the building. Make of it what you will. Incredible building. Ridiculous why you would have to have such a narrow building with so many stories at such an early time period. Now we have a rendering of the State Lunatic Asylum in Utica. Opened on January 16th, 1843, we're told. Interesting how we can go so far back in time and have an actual day it opened. With so many of these structures, they can't give us any sort of timeline on construction. Very early time period, 1843, this structure was built in Utica, we are told. And some of these wings added on in the subsequent years. 1846, wings were added on. 1850. They say the wings were added on because the hospital filled so quickly with the insane. Very interesting. We have early stages of the American Psychiatric Association with the first director of the Utica State Hospital, Amariah Brigham. Amariah Brigham with a curious and suspicious name. And we see here that he became the first editor of the association's official journal, the American Journal of Insanity, which eventually became the American Journal of Psychiatry. They should have kept it the American Journal of Insanity. I think that would have been a much more apt description for what we're looking at here. And you have all sorts of local ghost stories and things like that attached to the structure. But really the magnificence of the structure is still shining through the weathering and how it was left like this for so long. But you can still tell that the majesty is there of the old world. And a few strange parts of the narrative attached to the Utica Asylum. This would be the Utica Crib. And the kind-hearted Brigham disliked the then current practice of using chains to restrain patients, so he invented the Utica Crib as an alternative. It was 18 inches deep, 8 feet long, and 3 feet wide. Nice and roomy. And they used it to control and calm patients who were out of control. Again, you have to ask yourself at these early time periods, why were there so many people that were dubbed insane? And of course, if you've done any of this type of research, you realize all the ridiculous things that would deem you insane at that time period and put you in one of these state hospitals. So this is again a haunted shadow of our past that I think many of us would like to sweep under the rug, but it's something we're going to have to come to grips with, I think, in understanding our true past and what has been done to us collectively. The orphan asylum. Of course, no shortage of orphans in the 1800s. And we get into some of the financial type of buildings, financially attached. Let's say we have insurance, we have banks. We have this spectacular savings bank here, still stands. Really, really amazing structure. And we are told construction began on this beauty in 1898, and it opened for business in February of 1900. Of course, the hallmark being its gold dome, which we can see in a modern day photograph here. Really quite a spectacular structure, not really making any sense for its purpose, as usual. And also a similar structure, styled in a similar way, the Trust and Deposit Company Bank. You see the gate work along the ridge here. And a bird's eye view from 1873. In 1873, Utica having about 30,000 residents, we are told. And you can see the size of the structures and the infrastructure and how well built everything is, even in this depiction. Very interesting, this area of North America, along right near the Great Lakes there. It really has all sorts of evidence of the old world. We have a brewery, the Utica Club it's being called, but it's a brewery. And yet another brewery. The Obliston apartment house, very interesting. We see on YouTube, if you do a search for the Obliston apartment house in Utica, you'll see that this is basically very close to being up for demolition. There's an attempt to restore it, but it has been a thorn in the side of the local municipal government of late. So I suspect that thing will see the wrecking ball if the restoration project fails. Of course, modern day, not having the domes or the cones on top, that having been scaled down, as you do. An Elks Club, looking a bit like a fortress with a basement. Historical Society. central fire station with the red brick featuring. And beautiful Soldiers and Sailors Monument. Spectacular fountain in the park. You see an older structure back here. Stone structure again with that cone peak. And this is the Canatena Flats, having a similar look to the Obliston apartments. It makes you wonder if we've also had a few of these peaks removed on the structure as well. And it really must have been an interesting time to live in, watching the modes of transportation being phased out, going from the streetcars to the motor cars and the construction of the highways, all of those types of things. I have an old bird's eye view here, again showing you the level of infrastructure, I guess, that we already have. Multi-storied, again, early time period. Why do you need to build so many multi-storied structures? There's so much undeveloped land. You would think, why does it all have to be so centralized and built vertically? Building vertically is a very difficult task to do, even in the modern day. In the 1800s, I would say it would have been a monumental task. And all you have to do is look at a photograph like this, and you have such a high resolution. It's really giving you a good visual of the quality of the construction of these types of buildings. We're also getting a good view of the brick paved streets and the streetcars and how that was such a part of everyday life at this time period. Very interesting feature here in the road. All these buildings adorned with ornamentation, multi-storied buildings. And really life in black and white at that time. Not just the clothing, but I suspect fresh memory wipe is what I suggest we had to deal with at that period of time, and it's taken us to this point in time to start questioning and understanding that something's been seriously wrong with our existence here, and our memory of the past has been all but erased. This central train station is quite spectacular as well, built in 2 years, 1912 to 1914, and that gives them enough time apparently to put in these stone or marble columns with these arched ceilings and octagonal decoration, coffer decorations. Really beautiful building. And of course the sitting areas, well built woodwork curved around a corner, all very difficult and time consuming, these projects would have been. And you keep in mind now that according to our historical narrative, many of these are going up everywhere and in short amounts of time, and at very odd times. That some of them are built right around the crash, stock market crash, or wartime, things like that. So much of our history not making sense. So we're trying to make sense of it, and we're speculating, and it's like throwing darts at a dartboard. You're not gonna hit a bullseye every time, but we're trying to get somewhere with it. And I think healthy speculation is important. We need to speculate and not get offended by what one might suggest about what really occurred in the past, because we know we can't anchor our history on the historical record, because the historical record is really brought to us by newspaper clippings, and we know we can't trust any of these news organizations. We've found that to be true. especially in the most recent years. We've learned now that we can't put any trust in those organizations because they're not looking out for our best interests. Beautiful. And we have a Masonic home. This is the chapel on those grounds. We'll see those grounds as we move forward in the video. There's that monument again. So many stone churches of the old world. So many, I suggest, have been decapitated, as in the towers have been scaled down, the tops have been removed, all in an attempt to hide the true past. St. John's Church. It really doesn't take much to recognize the majesty of these amazing churches. So many of these locations, it gets to a point when you see enough of them, you almost become numb to how spectacularly they have been put together. And of course the sheer volume of them. This is an old city hall. Again here, I suggest we probably have some scaling down happen sometime along that timeline. We have an old courthouse, no longer a courthouse, so we're looking at columns on the second floor, or third floor, depending if you're calling this a floor, or it looks like the ground level has just sort of come up, and you have to wonder if that window, this should be the same height as that window, and then this has just sort of come up around it. The old courthouse, so many of these disappeared from the historical record as well. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the Erie Canal running through this location, really spectacular. Places like Rochester, Syracuse, showing all sorts of signs of recovery from some sort of devastation and the reseeding and regeneration of civilization, and not an organic growth of civilization in the 1800s, but rather a digging out from an old world civilization. And you can really just see it in a photograph like this, where there's nothing new about the structures behind these two gentlemen, but the look on their faces tells me that they probably have no idea about the past. I could be wrong on that, but really they're just have been almost transplanted into an existence they don't fully understand, as the surroundings they don't fully understand. Fire department. And of course they get us chasing the dollar. Right? They control the creation of it, and they get us chasing it. Chasing lifestyles that will generate more dollars and make us think that the most important thing is how many things you have. Right, I think that's a part of the game, part of the deception. This is an infant's home. St. Joseph's Infants Home. So we have a home for infants as well. Orphans, infants. Think about that. Modern day, how many places do you know like this? Where there's just infants that needed places to be without parents. What are the numbers on that? Or has it all gone underground? If you get my meaning. We also have a home for aged couples. Now we do a lot of this. This is another part of that, a way of disconnecting us from our past. When the members of our family get to a certain age, they age out and we remove them from the home. And they get disconnected from their ancestors, from their grandkids. The visits become few and far between. And the conversation diminishes, and I think it's all calculated. That's how I look at it. Hard to read here. It says Knights Templar Building in the Masonic Home. So I think part of a complex, which we're getting to shortly here. Another part of that complex, The Wiley Hall for boys. So again, all these structures supposedly built to house these, children, infants, Masonic home, elderly. It all has an underlying sinister feeling. It's something we really need to unearth. Here would be the main building of that Masonic home. Not looking new whatsoever. From another angle. Very nice crisp photo again. And you can see basement windows, the ivy, the age of the structure. Supposedly an orphans asylum again. Orphan asylum. Possibly the same structure we saw earlier. The House of the Good Shepherd. What was that for? We're seeing all of these supposedly benevolent organizations housing people that need housing. It's really got to make you wonder. Of course, the hospitals. Are the hospitals all really looking out for the best interests of the people? What do you think? And home. Again, St. Luke's Hospital and home. Hotel Martin. Right here. There it is again. Having that old world look and feel. St. James Hotel. There you have the ugly awnings put on. Somebody doesn't like the sunlight, it appears. You have here, if you look a little closer, you can see the windows going down into the ground too. Why on earth would you ever build like that? You wouldn't. It doesn't really make any sense. Looks like more something you would have had to have dug out. Build around. Hotel Utica, or Utica Hotel. Apparently all sorts of ghost stories attached to this one. I have a couple shots of the interior just to give you a sense of how spectacular the finishing was. Also the ceiling heights. All things to take note of. The quality of the woodwork. All from a time period where power tools would have been either very young or not used at all. So, time frames, of course, never really accounting for these things. And all we're really told about the Hotel Utica is when it opened, 1912. Are we supposed to assume now that we don't have the records for when construction began on this? We have a list of all the famous people, all the starlets, let's say, that visited these locations. We're supposed to be starstruck. But we can't actually get a start date on construction. It's got to make you wonder. And the big industry in this region as well. This is also, I think, very important to point out. During the mid-19th century, Utica's canals and railroads supported industries producing furniture, locomotive headlights, steam gauges, firearms, textiles, and lumber. Very interesting. And we also had the asylums and the hospitals, which all had to have people employed. So where does that leave us for how many people were actually in the building, in the construction trades, let's say, building these structures after all is said and done? It's really something we need to put together. The old jail, very grainy photo, but you can see the turret. Those Canatena apartments again, giving you a much better view, and of course the streets with the street cars. This looking really old, nothing new looking about any of this here. This looks like it was a part of an old world city, and they're just picking up the pieces and giving it a go again. Public library, modern day. I love when they give us the sign to tell us when it was built. You have a National Guard armory, one of 2 armories in Utica. This is saying, it's very difficult to make out. I don't think we've seen this though. I'm not sure. If anyone can make that out, let me know. House of the something. Possibly the House of the Good Shepherd. And here's the other armory. I love the old armories. I did do a video on armories as well. Check that out. Now we have the old Opera House, which I found very difficult to get much more visual or any information on besides what you're looking at here. And I would be willing to wager that the interior of this building was an absolute jaw-dropper. But I can't tell you for sure because there's no proof of it. But we do have an early post office. Early retail store, we're told. This giving you a bit of a look at on the inside. Okay, into the schooling narrative here, the Free Academy. Amazing structure. 1, 2, 3, 4 stories. Not looking like it burnt down. This is an interesting photograph. This looks superimposed as far as I'm concerned. Supposedly supposed to be a charred beam of some sort, I guess. Looks like fire, 1908. We have a school and a YMCA. I love the old YMCAs as well. Really making no sense at all that these would have been built in such a manner. They're obviously a repurposed old world structure, in my opinion. Another free academy. It all gets very murky. You find when you dig into this stuff, you find so much. It becomes it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. This is the Hamilton College. You can just sort of get a sense of it in the background here. So many of these been given names of schools or hospitals, orphanages, things like that. Or a high school. Again, looking like something's been chopped off of here and here. Industrial school, of course. Why wouldn't you build an industrial school in the 1800s in Utica in such a manner? You could have called this a city hall or a courthouse, and I would have believed you as well, but in this case we're looking at an industrial school. Now that's an industrial school worth going to. Of course, Cornell University having no shortage of some of these old world style buildings in Utica. We do have the Stanley Theater still standing. Many of these old world cities, small cities, having more theaters than you can shake a stick at. Some of them still having the visual evidence and many of them not having that anymore. But here we're looking at the interior of the Stanley Theater. Beautiful. There a look at the stage. So the performing arts really had to have been a large part of this old world civilization. With all the opera houses and theaters, I would imagine the musicians and the level of musicianship would have been really top-notch, hard for us maybe to even understand. And certainly worth considering when you think of the composers and the narrative we're given about the composers. The Mozarts and the Beethovens. Mozart died when he was 26, started composing at the age of 6. This could because they had to attribute all of the works to a single person. Beethoven was deaf, yet composed this music. I don't know, at what point do we have to start questioning these things as well? So much to question. Question everything, friends. Question everything. Don't take anything at face value. Don't trust. We can't trust what we've been told. Anyway, this has been a look at Utica, New York. I tried to pick a smaller size city, a little bit older city, not like the ones on the western side of the continent, but certainly having all sorts of old world evidence for us to look at. I hope you enjoyed this exploration, and stay tuned for the next one. Thanks.